Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Hope Frontier Podcast. This is Phil, and today we're going to do a new story in the Bible, and we're going to go back to the Old Testament here, and we're going to take a look at Numbers 16. Now, in the book of Numbers, just to set up the situation, Moses was in the wilderness with the Israelites, and the reason they were there is because the people did not trust God, and God couldn't work with them. God wanted to bless them. God wanted to allow them into the promised land so they could all share it together and be happy. But the people didn't trust God, even when He just led them out of Egypt. So God did all these miracles. All the people saw it. And yet they still don't trust God. They're grumbling, and they just don't really want to put their faith into Him. So God cannot work with these type of people, and so they are banished to the wilderness. So that's where we are. And in this story today, this really shows and exemplifies how the people of Israel were so hard-hearted and how they could not trust God in any way, shape, or form. So this story is a powerful one. And I'm not sure if everybody here knows the story very well, but we're going to go through it. This is just chapter 16. So we're going to get started, and we'll do bit by bit because this story is a little long. So instead of going through the whole thing, we're going to break it apart. So here we go. This is verse 1. One day, Korah, son of Ishar, a descendant of Kohath, son of Levi, conspired with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, from the tribe of Reuben. They incited a rebellion against Moses, along with 250 other leaders of the community, all prominent members of the assembly. So we'll just stop right there so we can set up the situation. So these are not just some nobodies. These are really prominent people in the Israelite culture at the time. Korah was actually Aaron's cousin. So they're really closely related here. Korah is the descendant of Levi. So just like Aaron, he is in the priestly class. That's his birthright, is to be in that priestly family. And what he does is he decides to conspire with the descendants of Reuben. So Reuben was the firstborn from Jacob. And by all rights, he should have been the dominant leader of the tribe. But because of his problems, Reuben basically had sex with his father's concubine. And so he lost the firstborn title, got that revoked from him. So the descendants of Reuben are trying to usurp what position they have in the community and trying to take back by force what was not given to them because of the decision of Reuben. So what these leaders of these clans do is they gather the most prominent members of the assembly. So it really just shows us, just even today, how easily people can be misled or incited against the people in power. It just shows the fickleness of human heart and how easy it is just to trick someone into changing sides. So in verse 3, they united against Moses and Aaron and said, "You have gone too far. The whole community of Israel has been set apart by the Lord, and He is with all of us. What right do you have to act as though you are greater than the rest of the Lord's people?" So we'll stop there. So these people have somewhat truth with what they're saying, but somewhat not truth. And this is what happens a lot of times when we are seduced into sin and seduced into rebellion. So there's always some sort of truth there, but they twist it. Because it is true that Israel is set apart by the Lord as a whole community. But the Lord did give special favor and special appointment to certain people. So really, what Korah and what the tribe of Reuben are saying in this situation is that they're angry at God for choosing and appointing other people instead of themselves. These people were prominent leaders in Israel. They had high positions and were honored, which is really shows you why they were able to grab people so quickly. But they weren't satisfied with that. And that's what happens a lot in our world around us today. That people are filled with greed and positional power. They want to be recognized, and a lot of times they'll take it by force. And this is the exact situation here. So not only are they rebelling against Moses and Aaron, but they're rebelling against what God has put in place. God decided to do something, and they don't want it that way. And this really just happens throughout the whole Old Testament, even up to this point. In the Garden of Eden, the spiritual being rebelled against God. He didn't like the way that God is going to use people. And you see it throughout the whole book of Genesis when all the brothers are fighting each other. So how does Moses react? And this is verse 4. When Moses heard what they were saying, he fell face down to the ground. Then he said to Korah and his followers, "Tomorrow morning the Lord will show us who belongs to him and who is holy. The Lord will allow only those whom he selects to enter his own presence. Korah, you and all your followers must prepare your incense burners. Light fires in them tomorrow and burn incense before the Lord. Then we will see whom the Lord chooses as his Holy One. You Levites are the ones who've gone too far." So we'll stop there. So Moses, as a true Moses character here, bows down and just brings it before God. That was one thing he did amazingly, was he always brought his situation to God. He didn't confront them face to face. He fell face down first. This is the posture where he's showing God the reverence and asking God to be his advocate, to listen to him, to help him. Moses isn't using his positional power as a claim for his own greatness. He just tells them, I'll let God choose, okay? Because Moses knows deep down that without God, he is nothing. Why should he lead the people? It's because God chose him. So if these people have a problem, well then God can show them why he has been chosen. They need to listen to God. So Moses just lets them have the opportunity to bring their case before God. And that's a great way to do this. He does get angry at them because he recognizes they've gone a little too far here. But he really is going to let the Lord be the one who defends himself. He doesn't have to put all of his own issues on the table here. He doesn't have to make it about him because he knows that won't work. It's going to be about God. So Moses spoke again to Korah in verse 8. "Now listen, you Levites. Does it seem insignificant to you that the God of Israel has chosen you from among all the community of Israel to be near him, so you can serve in the Lord's tabernacle and stand before the people to minister to them? Korah, he's already given you this special ministry to you and your fellow Levites. And now you're demanding the priesthood as well? The Lord is the one you and your followers are really revolting against. For who is Aaron that you're complaining about him?" So we can see right here, Moses can see through what they're doing and calls them out and says that God has already blessed you so much, but you're grasping and you're wanting to take what God has given to other people. And of course, we know that God does not work that way. So in verse 12, Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they replied, "We refuse to come before you. Isn't it enough that you brought us out of Egypt, a land flowing with milk and honey, to kill us here in the wilderness, and that you now treat us like your subjects? What's more, you haven't brought us into another land flowing with milk and honey. You haven't given us a new homeland with fields and vineyards. Are you trying to fool these men? We will not come." So Moses tries to talk some sense in the tribe of Reuben, but they don't want to listen at all because they can't see and can't admit that they're the ones at fault. What they want to do is they want to blame somebody else for their inability to be faithful to God. So what are they complaining about? They're saying, hey, in Egypt, it was full of milk and honey. We were so happy there. Except that we were slaves and that we couldn't do anything about our life, right? And what do? They're blaming Moses and saying that he brought them here in the wilderness. And we know that is not the case at all, because the people themselves refused to believe God after he did miracle after miracle. It is their hard heart. It is their desire to take control of their entire life and not trust God, which is what brought them into the wilderness in the first place. But they don't want to take responsibility. They want to blame somebody else. And this is what happens in our world. Everybody else wants to blame someone because it's easy. It's easier to blame somebody else than take responsibility for your own actions. And what they even try and do is they try to just smash Moses' character. What they're saying at the end, are you trying to fool these men? A direct reference to Moses' past, where he killed the Egyptian and tried to fool everybody into thinking that nothing happened, right? Trying to hide the situation and pretend like, oh, nothing really happened. I don't know what happened. So now they're trying to attack his character. So even though he's been appointed by God after he did all those things, those people are still going at him for that. And as Christians, as we further our life with God and as we receive his blessings, people are going to try to go at you and go at your past and history. And they don't want to admit that God is doing something new in your life. And just like what Moses does here, we can't let that stop us. Let God be the one who shows them. Let God be the one who brings his judgment, right? We don't have time for that. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. We don't want to do that. So Moses, verse 15, became very angry and said to the Lord, do not accept their offering. I have not taken anything from them, not so much as a donkey. I haven't hurt a single one. And Moses said to Korah, you and all your followers must come here tomorrow and present yourselves before the Lord. Aaron will also be there. You and each of your 250 followers must prepare an incense burner and put incense on it so you can all present them before the Lord. Aaron will also bring his incense burner. So Moses lays it all out, the big showdown. And what's really going on here is Moses is really just saying to those people, if you think that you're so special by God's eyes, then why don't you prove it and show how that you are the one who can connect to God in a way that we can't do that. And of course, God is not going to like that, because God doesn't like it when we rebel against his authority, which is what they're doing. And we're actually going to see how even spiritually we can see how they were so blatantly disregarding God. In the Egyptian culture, they did use these same incense burners as a way to ward off evil, as a way to do incantations, and a way to connect with their God and to allow their God's presence into their temples. So the act of using these burners would be known to the people of Israel, since they were just coming out of Egypt. But now here's the real question. Are these Israelite people going to worship God the right way or the wrong way? And this is really what God's going to see their heart and get them for, because we know that it's serious. In Leviticus chapter 10, we have Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, and they don't take God's direction seriously. And then God kills them for that. And most likely, what they did was they wanted to prepare the incense in the way that they had done in Egypt. So God does not want to be worshipped like other gods. He is unique and he is special, and it just shows the lack of respect that they had for the one true God. Just thinking that they could do what they did with the old gods in Egypt and just copy paste it for this God. And I think that's the bigger issue that's going on here. It's not just that they were, whoops, I made a mistake. No, that's not the situation. They are just thinking that their God is no different than any other god around them. They think that they can just treat him the same way, they can do the same ritual, the same customs, and that shouldn't be a problem. That attitude is the very reason why they cannot get into the promised land. God cannot work with people who treat him just like every other god in the world. God is unique and special, and we have to make note of that, and we have to treat him that way. So in verse 18, each of the men prepared the incense burner, lit the fire, and placed incense on it. And they all stood at the tabernacle with Moses and Aaron. And meanwhile, Korah stirred up the entire community against Moses and Aaron. And they all gathered at the tabernacle entrance. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to the whole community. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Get away from all these people, so that I may instantly destroy them." But Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground. "O God," they pleaded, "you are the God who gives breath to all creatures. Must you be angry with all the people when only one man sins?" So we'll stop there. So the presence of God is here. And God is not happy because time and again, as he's trying to work with these people, as he's trying to lead them into the promised land, as he's trying to fulfill what he wants the Israelites to do, which is to represent him to all the world, they have been fighting him every step of the way. They are rebelling again and again. And these people most likely are bringing in the custom and culture of the Egyptians and how they worship their gods and applying it like a copy-paste to God of the Bible. So God is not having that. He cannot work with them after they pledged and promised, with their own lives they promised, that they will follow him and him alone. But Moses and Aaron do what they do best, and they intercede. And it, to me, is amazing how much that they just intercede. So verse 23, the Lord said to Moses, "Tell all the people to get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." So Moses got up and rushed over the tents of Dathan and Abiram, followed by the leaders of Israel. "Quick," he told the people, "get away from the tents of these wicked men, and don't touch anything that belongs to them. If you do, you will be destroyed for their sins." So all the people stood back from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Then Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the entrances of their tent, together with their wives and children and little ones. So the Lord decides, okay, I won't kill everybody, but these people must be judged. So Moses runs over, asks the people to get out, because he realizes that if you are next to evil, your life is going to crumble. And that's a great principle that we can really apply to our lives. When we spend time and when we put evil things into our life, we are going to be tainted by sin. Israel's job was to be pure and to be holy. They were to be separated. But when they kept coming into contact with sin, they can't be in the presence of God. That's why it's so important for us to watch what we do, watch who we're with, and watch what we see, especially see, right, on the TV these days. Because we don't want to become tainted. We don't want to be in the presence of things that can defile us, because we want to be used by God for something great. Verse 28, and Moses said, "This is how you know the Lord has sent me to do all these things I have done, for I have not done them on my own. If these men die natural death, or if nothing unusual happens, the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord does something entirely new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them and all their belongings, and they will go alive into the grave, then you will know that these men have shown contempt for the Lord." He had hardly finished speaking these words when the ground suddenly split open beneath them, The earth opened its mouth and swallowed the men, along with their households and all their followers who were standing with them and everything they owned. So they went down into the grave along with all their belongings. The earth closed over them, and they all vanished among the people of Israel. All the people around them fled when they heard their screams. "The earth will swallow us too," they cried. Then fire blazed forth from the Lord and burned up the 250 men who were offering incense. Whoa, it just got real, huh? So what Moses does very clearly and says, "This is not me. I have no credit here. This is going to be the Lord." Right? And when a miracle happens in our life, we cannot take credit for it. Moses did that one time when he struck the rock, and what happened? God told him he was going to die without ever stepping foot into the promised land. So we don't want to take credit for what God does because it limits the glory that God will have, which is reducing the kingdom of God. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep giving the glory to God. So yes, the ground opens up like a sinkhole probably, swallows them up, then everything comes tumbling down and they get buried alive. And this is theological, what God does. Because the fact that the earth, which is also known as Sheol, where the dead go, is also attributed to the Canaanite god Mot. And even in some of their texts, this god of death, Mot, opens up the ground and swallows people. So what God is showing here, and all the people would see, that what they did was evil, and they are judged and being brought down into death, into the underworld, for their blasphemy. Everyone would see, and no one would contest that what these people did was judged by the holy God. So with Mot being this underworld god who swallowed these men and their families, it really just solidifies the fact that it really was a rebellion against God. And then God isn't finished there, because the fire blazes forth and burns up the other men who are offering the incense. Okay, so we're going to skip 39 and 40. They just take the incense burners and melt it down, and they use that to go on the altar. So we'll go in verse 41. The very next morning, the whole community of Israel began muttering again against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You've killed the Lord's people." As the community gathered to protest against Moses and Aaron, they turned toward the tabernacle and saw that the cloud had covered it, and the glorious presence of the Lord appeared. I can't believe it. Can you? Like, they literally yesterday just saw God's judgment. God proved, these are not my people. Moses and Aaron are my people. Follow them. And the community again is muttering. Not just muttering, they're in revolt. They're angry at God. And they even said, "You killed Yahweh's people." It's a slap in the face to God. They're just basically telling God, "God, you were wrong because they were your perfect people. Oh my, and look what your servants did. Look what your servant Moses and your servant Aaron did. They killed your people." It's outrageous. And God not having it. Verse 43. Moses and Aaron came and stood in front of the tabernacle. The Lord said to Moses, "Get away from all these people so that I can instantly destroy them." But Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground. And Moses said to Aaron, "Quick, take an incense burner and place burning coals on it from the altar. Lay incense on it and carry it among the people to purify them and make them right with the Lord. The Lord's anger is blazing against them. The plague has already begun." God is going to judge the people because once again, he cannot work with these people. They continuously revolt and rebel against him, despite all that God wants to do in their life, despite all the times he's been with them and all the miracles he's shown to them. But Moses and Aaron, once again, are the intercessors for the people, despite how many times they've tried to rebel against Moses and Aaron, kill him, complain, try to throw him out of the community. He continues to honor and love them and continues to fight on their behalf, even when they deserve their punishment. So unlike Korah, Aaron is going to take the burning coals from the altar. He knows the process for honoring God, and he wants to respect God. And that's why he's going to be successful. That's why he'll be able to purify the people as this plague is beginning to be released upon the people. So in verse 47, Aaron did as Moses told him and ran out among the people. The plague had already begun to strike down the people, but Aaron burned the incense and purified the people. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague stopped. But 14,700 people died in that plague, in addition to those who had died in the affair involving Korah. Then, because the plague had stopped, Aaron returned to Moses at the entrance of the tabernacle. And that's the end of the chapter. So what Aaron does is quite bold. He is the chief priest. His job and his duty is to be ritually pure and clean. But what does he do? He runs out in the middle of the plague, standing between the dead and the living. So he is placing himself in a place where he will intentionally become defiled. And he's doing that to plead before God and stop the plague. And this is a great foreshadowing for what Jesus is going to do when he comes to earth. Because Jesus is going to take our defilement upon himself so that he could make us clean, so that he could stop death in its tracks. And so this is really just showing the people in the future what the Messiah is going to do, what the one person is going to do to be the perfect priest. Because Aaron, as the high priest, really laid down his purity, his ritual purity for the people. And God listened to that. And so we have to really think for ourselves, when we experience and when we see people who are experiencing pain, let us be the intercessors and come before God and ask for healing. Don't forget that we have the power of the Holy Spirit within us, so we can bring the power of Jesus into their life. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed number 16. In my mind, you rarely hear about that in the church, so I thought, hey, it'd make a great podcast. So through the whole story, we can really see that God puts people in our lives, God makes authority, and he wants us to respect it, and he wants us to respect him. Because at the end of the day, when we are honoring God and trusting in the way that he works, we can be able to receive his blessing and receive his wisdom so that we don't have to make mistakes and so that we don't have to live our lives in the wilderness like these Israelites did. So thanks so much for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Hope Frontier.